seen what love looks like, I've seen its beauty when it's alive.
Here we are, keyframe number 2, the wonderful big blank page. Now, just so you know, I never ever work in a studio in silence. I have music playing all the time. Hopefully a song or playlist that will conjure the right emotion and feeling I'm trying to capture. But there's something about performing the art rather than constructing the art. You are literally inside the picture, drawing out, rather than being outside figuring out how it's supposed to look. So much more like dreaming pictures down on paper, exactly like when you're asleep, and there's really no effort in constructing the characters and the world and the dialogue and the stuff in your dreams. You just do it, and you do it according to what you're feeling and thinking in your subconscious. So I'm trying to do the same thing here. I'm conjuring this wife in Pig's head that he no longer has around, but he loves more than anything on earth. Now I'm trying to figure out the relationship between the memory of this woman, who's going to be large in the sky behind him, and Pig, right after he pulled himself out of the bed, stumbled downstairs and made himself a bowl of porridge. A lot of it's trial and error, right? You can see that here. I'm drawing and redrawing the face. It's not that there was anything wrong with the face that was there before. I redraw it to, I guess, have something to build off of, right? The first face there sets the note, it sets the key, it sets the tempo of the picture. And so it's important that it feels right, that it feels like it's the right placement on the page and the right attitude of expression and so on. I'm sure I'll be drawing this several more times, but something about the raised chin and the higher looking down on Pig that might speak a little better to their relationship. I think I redid her, you notice, after I tried drawing a face for Pig in there, and there didn't seem to be any relationship between the two. So it's important to get them both in there as early as possible so you can see how they interact. So I'm looking for that relationship here. A lot of the wonderful tools you have digitally allow you to do that. If I was to do this traditionally, I would be using many, many pieces of paper, and just instead of erasing it, I would draw one and quickly set it aside and draw another, set it aside. I don't really use tracing paper and move things around. I find it much more fun, easy to just redraw the thing. Every time I draw it, I learn something new about it. But anyway, yeah, that's starting to feel like the right proportion, and there's some sort of interaction going on between the two of them there. For Pig, I guess I imagined at first he was down there having some sort of bowl of porridge or breakfast. But as you'll see, I found I think a funnier moment for him, and a more telling moment. And just so you know what I mean by that, telling moment is something that really, without hitting it on the head, tells you so much about the character, right? I remember in early writing classes, one of the examples they gave was a hard-bitten detective. You go into his room and you see him sitting there impassive. There is no clue as to what is going on inside this guy. But if you look on the table, there's a pencil that he uses, and the pencil has all these bite marks in it. Now that's a telling detail, right? That tells you what's going on inside this man, that there's actually a lot of tension, maybe even anger. it's kind of what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for those telling details, and particularly in what Pig is actually doing. So you'll see my search to find the right action that will convey what's going on inside of Pig. I haven't figured out who she would be if I was casting a movie, or what she would be wearing. I also remember this takes place in the future. I don't know how far in the future. Far enough that there's robots or artificial AI people, but still recognizable. So I haven't really figured out the fashion or the clothing style or anything like that. I think it's probably recognizable, probably a lot like today. So there's something about what she's wearing that has to speak future and at the same time be comfortable, realistic. She's not a fashion model, but she is his muse. She just modeled for him. He was successful, and now they've fallen on harder times. But I imagine he remembers her from the grander times when they could afford slightly more fashionable costumes. So I'm enjoying throwing shapes around on her to try and conjure a costume that feels couture, possibly. Something with a bit of panache to it, because it's a part of who she is and what she does. I think I'm not touching yet until I've imagined her on the screen a bit more, just as really what you're seeing behind him there is what's going on inside his head. So the whole thing is a portrait of Pig. The more real she becomes, the more real he becomes to me too. I have a list of things that are, I guess, tools from my toolkit that I wanted to share with you. What you're watching is me designing in action, all right? So rather than thinking through the world, rather than through the logic of the place, the technology levels, the fashion styles, what the different parts of the world are like, because he's from the old world and they're now here in the new world. And so how do you show that? I'm trying to just answer the question, what do I need to say in this frame? What's the story moment? And if I can find the thing that best supports the story, somehow that will also answer those questions about what it needs to be design-wise. I think I'm getting closer on the face and what I want. There's a hint of a smile, the sort of thing that Cheshire Cat-like might linger on in his mind. I can tell now, just looking at this, that he's got to be doing something that triggers this memory of her. So he's not going to be having a bowl porch. He's got to be doing something else that he just hears her voice in his head whenever he does it. So we shall see what that becomes in just a moment. I mean, really, the answer to where do ideas come from? They come from the necessity of answering a question. Once you have a question, you're not trying to conjure something out of thin air. You're actually just trying to answer that. And very often, the best answer, the right answer, is the first one. Not because it's the best, but because then you move on and ask the next question. So you're really building things out of the different kinds of questions that you ask. This is where I guess in my head I'm starting to ask the basic art questions, like where's the light coming from? What's her posture? What's driving that upright head? I think it's probably she's standing. She's at her best, which is how he would remember her, of course. So here he is, and he's got a faint smile. That smile, because she's there, we know that smile's for her. What is he doing? He's doing something with his hands. And here I am using my lighting to silhouette him so that he's actually not the main focus. He's actually not even really here. He's off in his own imagination. But I think it'd be really, really funny if she was maybe always scolding him for not, for wearing the same clothes day in, day out. I know that a lot of artists, just for convenience, will put their old clothes on from the day before, wander up to their studio. And so, especially because I want to have an element of a mad scientist about him. He's got something, probably not a pair of underwear, maybe socks. And he's sniffing them before he puts them on. And he knows she wouldn't approve. And we mustn't forget that. It's his through line right now, is that he is desperately lonely, really missing the person he loves most. And hopefully, I know he's sad and he's lonely, but, I'd like to think that there's still things that can make him smile. This would be one of those, thinking of her, thinking of what she'd say if she caught him. If you're wondering what I'm doing with these big lines across, I'm, again, trying to direct your eye, wanting to connect these. So I know that the environment around them, without working out what it actually is, needs to have these shapes. I think I'm going to use the same trick I used in the first painting, where I'm casting giant bars of light, the silhouette of the window on the wall behind. That helps me to frame him, and also in a strange way imprison him. But it's a romantic moment too, right? There's this, even though he's remembering the real person and guiltily sniffing his old socks, but by and large, this is him wishing she'd come back. And so I can put some, soft sunlight, almost like mist, making this all a little more gentle, a little more ethereal and dreamlike than it was at the moment. Now, at the very end, I start to fade her out, because I want her to be the memory and him to be the reality of what's going on. So when I get to the stage, the rest is just bringing it home, adjusting the tones. There's all kinds of invisible tools, aids to make the audience feel a certain way that you have at your disposal. You have your eye line, right? Depending on whether you're looking directly at the character or whether you're looking up at them or looking down, can make the viewer feel very, very different without even knowing that you've done that to them. Looking up at someone tends to aggrandize them, or makes them looking down at you. So you might be putting your audience in a slightly more submissive pose by lowering your eye line. If you raise it up, of course, you're diminishing them a little, or diminishing what they're doing. So, a high shot looking down on the two hobbits as they march off towards Mordor might make you realize they have a pretty hopeless task ahead of them. You have your lighting, of course, and lighting is a powerful, powerful tool for conjuring emotion. Apart from anything else, just the key of the image, whether it's a light image or a dark image, and whether your lighting is harsh and strong or very muted and diffuse. By using the very strong side lighting, like that 3/4 side lighting, it gives her face a lot of power, pulls out some of the angles on the nose, the strength of the cheekbones and so on, and that maybe is more appropriate for what he'd be remembering about her. It's not just the glamour, it's also some of the strength and maybe even the judgment. And the lighting is helping me to do that. There's also your lens, by the way. This is much more the telephoto lens, where you're crushing things in together, because it's an intimate moment, and I'd like them to be close together, even though there really isn't any perspective to talk of here, because she's just this big memory in his head, and I'd like that memory to be close behind him. At the very end, I add my blue photo filter. Again, it adds maybe a touch of melancholy. It also helps bind everything together. There we have it for the second keyframe. We have Pig dragged himself out of bed, getting dressed, smelling an old sock, which suddenly makes him give a rebellious laugh as he remembers her and what she might say if she had caught him doing that. And by now, we know our main character. We know what he wants. We know he wants her. And we know why he can't get her. Maybe not in detail yet, but we know he can't have her because she's gone. Something has made everything disappear. Right, join me for the second keyframe while we hopefully answer the audience's question, what on earth happened?